The unexpected visitor. Dr. Eric Quinn sat alone in his quiet lab, surrounded by rows of blinking equipment and faintly glowing monitors. It was a late, uneventful evening, or so he thought. The lab was nestled in the middle of nowhere, deep in the mountains, where no one ever visited without a reason. Eric liked it that way. He needed the silence to focus on his research. As he poured himself a cup of coffee, a strange sound echoed through the room. It wasn't the hum of machines or the occasional creak of the old building. No, it was something else, sharp and deliberate. It was a knock. Eric froze, his heart skipping a beat. Who would be out here at this hour? Grabbing a flashlight, he made his way to the metal door, every step weighed down by an uneasy feeling. He hesitated before opening the door, but when he did, he saw something he never expected. Standing there was a tall woman, her skin shimmering faintly under the moonlight. She had long, silvery hair that seemed to move on its own, and her eyes glowed a soft blue. She didn't look human. "Dr. Eric Quinn?" she asked, her voice smooth and melodic, yet carrying an urgency that was hard to miss. Eric couldn't speak at first. He blinked, trying to process what he was seeing. The woman tilted her head, as if studying his reaction. "I am Caria," she said, stepping closer. Her movements were graceful but deliberate, almost as if she was trying not to frighten him. "I've come a long way to find you." Eric swallowed hard and finally managed to speak. "Who? What are you? And how do you know my name?" Caria's glowing eyes softened, and she took a deep breath. "I come from a distant planet, one you've never heard of. My people are in danger, and you are the only one who can help us." Eric's scientific mind kicked in. Aliens, was this some kind of elaborate prank? But as he looked at her, the shimmering light of her skin, the strange aura around her, he realized there was no trickery here. She was real. "I'm not sure what you think I can do for you," he said cautiously, stepping back into the lab. "I'm just a scientist. A geneticist, yes, but not someone who saves planets." Caria followed him inside, her presence filling the room with an unearthly energy. "Your work is exactly why I came. Humans possess something unique in your DNA, something my species has lost. Without it, we are doomed. I need your help, Dr. Quinn. I need you to make me a mother." Eric froze, the words hanging in the air like a thunderclap. "What?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Caria looked at him with a mixture of desperation and hope. "My species has become sterile. Our future is at risk. You have the knowledge and the tools to help me conceive a child. This child will not only save my people, but also create a bridge between our worlds." Eric's mind raced. This was impossible. Or was it? His work on genetic manipulation and hybridization had broken boundaries before, but this, helping an alien conceive, it was absurd, yet strangely plausible. He felt the weight of her gaze, her sincerity cutting through his doubt. "I don't even know where to start," Eric said, running a hand through his hair. "This is beyond anything I have ever done." Caria stepped closer, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "You don't have to decide now, but you must understand. Time is running out. If we don't act quickly, it will be too late for my people." Eric looked at her, torn between curiosity, fear, and the growing realization that she wasn't lying. He couldn't ignore the urgency in her voice or the sadness in her eyes. She was pleading with him, not just for herself, but for an entire race. Before he could respond, the monitors in the lab flickered, and a low hum filled the room. Caria's expression changed, her glowing eyes narrowing. "They found me," she said, her voice now sharp and filled with tension. "Who?" Eric asked, his heart pounding. Caria didn't answer. Instead, she moved to the window and peered out into the darkness. "We don't have much time. Please, Dr. Quinn, will you help me?" Eric's mind screamed at him to say no, to send her away and return to his quiet life. But as he looked at her, standing there with a mixture of strength and vulnerability, he knew this was no ordinary moment. This was the beginning of something far bigger than himself. Taking a deep breath, he nodded. I don't know how, but I'll try. Karia's face softened, a hint of relief breaking through her tension. Thank you, Eric. You've just taken the first step towards saving more lives than you can imagine. Outside, the faint sound of something approaching grew louder, a reminder that their time was limited. Eric knew his life was about to change forever, and he wasn't sure if he was ready. The impossible request. Dr. Eric Quinn stared at Karia, his mind reeling from her words. Make me a mother. The sentence echoed in his head, both absurd and haunting. How could a human help an alien conceive a child? What science, what ethics could justify such a thing? You need to explain, Eric said, his voice steady but edged with caution. Start from the beginning. Karia sat down, her tall, graceful form folding in a way that seemed both alien and familiar. Her glowing eyes softened, but there was a tension in her posture, as though every second spent talking was a second wasted. My people are known as the Erythians, she began, her melodic voice quieter now. We once thrived on a planet called Arion, a lush world far from here. For thousands of years, we grew and prospered, developing technologies that allowed us to explore the stars. But we became careless. We tampered with our own biology, believing we could improve ourselves. We wanted perfection, but we achieved sterility instead. Eric leaned forward, his curiosity piqued despite his skepticism. Sterility? You mean your entire species can't reproduce? Karia nodded, her expression somber. We tried to reverse it, but it was too late. Our genetic diversity collapsed. We've been on the brink of extinction for centuries, surviving only through cloning and artificial means. But those methods are failing us. Our bodies are breaking down. We need natural birth to survive. And you think humans are the answer? Eric asked, his tone skeptical. Karia's glowing gaze met his. Yes, your species is uniquely compatible with ours. Your DNA contains something ours has lost, what you call adaptability. If I can conceive a child with your help, it will be the first natural birth for my kind in generations. That child will carry the hope of two worlds. Eric stood, pacing the room. His mind was a storm of thoughts. Even if this is possible, he said, what you're asking for is unprecedented. It's not just science. There are ethical implications, risks I can't even begin to calculate. Karia rose, her presence commanding yet pleading. I understand your hesitation, Eric, but consider this. If we fail, my people will vanish from the universe. Do you want that on your conscience? Eric stopped pacing, her words striking a nerve. He had spent his life pushing the boundaries of genetics, always believing science could solve anything. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Why me? He asked finally, turning to face her. Why not someone else? Karia hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. Because you are the best. Your work on genetic hybridization is known across galaxies. And she paused, as if weighing whether to reveal more. Because I trust you. Before Eric could respond, the lab's lights flickered. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Karia's expression changed instantly, her glowing eyes narrowing. They'd found us. Who? Eric asked, his heart pounding. Karia moved to the window, her movements quick and fluid. The hunters. They are agents of the council. Leaders of my people who believe in maintaining control at any cost. They don't want a natural birth. They fear what it could mean. The hum grew louder, and Eric could now see faint lights in the distance, moving closer. His isolated lab, once a sanctuary, was no longer safe. We need to leave, Karia said, her voice sharp and urgent. If they capture me, all hope is lost. Eric grabbed a small bag of essentials, his mind racing. Where can we go? They'll find us anywhere. Karia touched a device on her wrist, and a holographic map appeared. There's a safe house nearby. It's shielded from their scans. We'll be safe there, for now. Eric hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. Let's go. As they stepped outside, the cold night air hit them like a wall. The stars above were bright, but Eric barely noticed them. His focus was on the approaching lights and the alien woman walking beside him. This was no longer just about science. It was about survival. They moved quickly, Caria leading the way with an almost unearthly precision. Behind them, the hum grew louder, the lights drawing closer. Eric's pulse raced. Who were these hunters? What would they do if they caught them? As they neared the edge of the forest, a bright beam of light swept across the ground, narrowly missing them. Run! Caria shouted, grabbing Eric's arm and pulling him forward. The two sprinted into the dense woods, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. Eric's lungs burned, and his mind screamed at him to stop, to turn back. But something deeper, something primal, kept him moving. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a hidden entrance in the ground. Caria activated a panel, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, she ordered. Eric dove in, and the door closed behind them, just as the sound of footsteps reached the clearing above. They were safe, for now. In the dim light of the underground shelter, Eric looked at Caria, his chest heaving. This isn't just about helping your species, is it? There's more to this than you're telling me. Caria's glowing eyes met his, a flicker of sadness in their depths. Yes, she said softly. There's much more. But first, you need to decide if you'll help me. Eric stared at her, the weight of her request pressing down on him. The world he knew was gone, replaced by something far stranger and far more dangerous. And yet, deep down, he knew there was no turning back. The hidden truth. The underground safe house was dimly lit, with walls lined in strange alien alloys that shimmered faintly as if alive. Eric sat on a bench, his head resting in his hands. His mind was racing, trying to process everything that had happened. Caria stood nearby, her glowing eyes fixed on a console embedded in the wall. She tapped at it with precision, her movements fluid yet tense. You need to tell me everything, Eric said, his voice breaking the silence. If I'm going to help you, I need the full truth. No more half explanations. Caria turned to him, her expression unreadable. What do you want to know? For starters, why are those people hunting you? Eric said. You told me they don't want you to conceive, but that doesn't explain why they'd risk chasing you across planets. Caria hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. The hunters work for the council, the governing body of my people. They fear change. For centuries, the council has maintained control through cloning and genetic manipulation. They see natural birth as a threat to their power. Eric frowned. But why? A natural birth would save your species, wouldn't it? Yes, Caria admitted. But it would also create something new, something they can't control. A hybrid child, blending human and Erythian DNA, would be a symbol of hope and unity. But to the council, it's a risk. They believe such a child could disrupt the balance of power, even challenge their authority. Eric leaned back, absorbing her words. So it's about politics, he muttered, not survival. Caria's expression darkened. It's about both. They would rather let my species die than lose their control. That's why I need your help. If we succeed, we can give my people a future free from their oppression. Eric's thoughts swirled. This was more than a scientific challenge. It was a political and moral minefield. He didn't trust the council, but he wasn't sure he trusted Caria either. You said humans and Erythians share a genetic link, he said. How is that possible? Our species evolved light years apart. Caria's glowing eyes softened, and she sat down across from him. That's the part you're not ready to hear, she said quietly. Eric's gaze hardened. Try me. Caria sighed, as if the weight of the universe rested on her shoulders. Erythians and humans didn't evolve separately. We share a common ancestor. Long ago, our species were one. We lived together on a planet called Origin. But a great cataclysm shattered our world, forcing us to flee. My people went to Arion, and your ancestors came to Earth. Over time, we became different, but traces of our shared lineage remain in your DNA. Eric stared at her, stunned. You're saying humans and Erythians are cousins? Caria nodded. In a way, yes. That's why your DNA is the key to saving us. It holds the adaptability we lost when we tampered with our genes. The revelation hit Eric like a thunderbolt. If what she said was true, it rewrote everything he knew about human history and evolution. But before he could respond, an alarm blared through the safe house, the high-pitched sound echoing off the metallic walls. Caria shot to her feet, her glowing eyes narrowing. They found us. Eric's heart sank. How? You said this place was shielded. They must have tracked our biosignatures, Caria said, moving to the console. We need to leave. Now. The safe house shook as a loud explosion echoed from above. Dust and debris rained down, and Eric stumbled to his feet, his pulse racing. What's the plan? He asked, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. Caria opened a hidden compartment in the wall, revealing a small, sleek device. This, she said, holding it up. It's a prototype teleporter. It can take us to another location. But it's risky. It wasn't designed for humans. Eric didn't like the sound of that. Risky how? Caria hesitated. There's a small chance it could destabilize your molecular structure, but staying here isn't an option. The pounding of footsteps above grew louder, and Eric could hear voices shouting in an alien language. He didn't need more convincing. Let's go. Caria activated the device, and a circle of light appeared on the floor. Step into the beam, she instructed. Eric took a deep breath and stepped into the light. For a brief moment, he felt as if his body were being pulled in every direction at once. Then, with a blinding flash, he was gone. When Eric's vision cleared, he found himself in a cavernous underground facility, its walls covered in strange, glowing symbols. Caria stood beside him, looking relieved. Where are we? Eric asked, his voice shaky. Caria smiled faintly. A place the council doesn't know about. A sanctuary. Eric looked around, his mind still racing. He had just teleported across who knew how many miles, and now he was standing in what looked like an alien command center. But even here, he couldn't shake the feeling that the hunters would find them eventually. Caria, he said, turning to her, if we're going to survive this, I need to know everything. No more secrets. Caria's smile faded, and she nodded. You're right. There's one more truth you need to hear, but I warn you, it will change everything. Eric braced himself, knowing that whatever she was about to reveal would take this already impossible situation to a whole new level. On the run. The underground facility was silent except for the soft hum of energy flowing through the walls. Eric paced back and forth, trying to process everything Caria had just told him. He had learned more about the Erythians in the past few days than in all his years of studying genetics, but none of it made sense. The idea that humans and Erythians shared a common origin was mind-blowing. How could this knowledge have been kept hidden for so long? Caria stood by the central control panel, her fingers dancing over the glowing interface as she monitored the security systems. Her expression was focused, but the flicker of worry in her eyes never left. The brief moment of safety they had found was fragile. Eric knew it wouldn't be long before the hunters would find their trail again. Caria, we can't keep running forever, Eric said, his voice breaking the tense silence. You said there was a sanctuary, but how safe is it, really? She didn't look up from the console, but her voice was calm, almost soothing. The sanctuary is hidden, buried beneath layers of shielding that the council cannot detect. But even here, we're vulnerable. The hunters are relentless. They've been tracking me since I left Arion. Eric clenched his fists. So, what do we do now? Caria finally turned to him, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his heart race. We wait. We gather information. I need to understand why the Council is so intent on stopping me from having this child. There's something I haven't told you yet, something critical." Eric frowned. "What do you mean?" Carria's voice dropped to a whisper. "The child I want to have with you isn't just a symbol of hope for my people. There's more to it. This child, born of human and Erythian blood, will have abilities no one can predict. Abilities that could change the balance of power not just for my species, but for the entire galaxy." Eric's mind raced. "What kind of abilities?" "Telepathy," she said softly. "Psychic abilities, enhanced physical strength, the ability to manipulate energy fields. This child will be a new kind of being, one who could unite worlds or destroy them." Eric took a step back, his breath catching in his throat. "You're telling me this child could be a weapon?" Carria shook her head. "No, not a weapon. But the Council sees it that way. They fear what this child could become. They fear the power of unity, of a new race that could bring together species that have been at war for millennia. My people are divided. The Council rules with an iron fist, and they've kept us in the dark about the truth of our origins. But the hybrid child, the one that will be born of both human and Erythian, could be the catalyst for change." Eric's mind whirled as he processed this information. This wasn't just about saving a species. This was about the power to change the fate of galaxies. The implications were enormous. Was he prepared to be part of something so monumental? Before he could voice his thoughts, the hum of the facility's defense system cut through the air, followed by a sharp beeping sound. Carria's eyes flicked to the monitor. "They'd found us," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "They'd broken through the outer layers of our defenses." Carria turned to him, her gaze filled with both regret and resolve. "You don't understand, Eric. The child will possess abilities far beyond what we could ever imagine. Abilities to manipulate minds, to influence thoughts and actions. It will be capable of controlling entire civilizations. The Council fears this because they know that once the child is born, there will be no more control. It will be able to bend the very fabric of reality to its will." Eric's mind reeled. He had heard of genetic manipulation, of experiments to enhance human capabilities, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't just about biology. It was about power. Immense, terrifying power. "But you still want to have this child?" Eric asked, his voice barely above a whisper, even knowing what it could become. Carria met his gaze with a mixture of determination and sorrow. "Yes, because even though the child will have power beyond comprehension, it will also have the ability to choose. I want it to have the freedom to decide its own fate, to decide whether it will be a force of destruction or a force of change. It's not the child's fault that it was born with such abilities. It's the Council's fault for trying to suppress everything they don't understand." Eric felt a pang of sympathy for her, but doubt lingered in his heart. He didn't know if he could trust her anymore. Could this child truly choose its own path? Or was Carria simply hoping for something that could never be? Before he could voice his thoughts, a sudden sharp noise broke through the quiet of the jungle. The sound of footsteps, fast and heavy, echoed through the dense foliage. Carria's eyes widened in alarm. "They found us," she said, turning quickly to Eric. "We have to move now." They broke into a run again, deeper into the jungle, the hunter's pursuit closing in fast. The sounds of alien voices shouting orders echoed around them, but Carria led them through the dense underbrush with a fierce determination. They reached the foot of a cliff, and Carria turned to Eric, her eyes frantic. "There's a cave at the top of this ridge. We can hide there for a while, but it won't be long before they catch up. We need to make our stand." Eric looked up at the steep incline ahead. It was a treacherous climb, and the sounds of the hunter's pursuit were only growing louder. He didn't have the luxury of time to doubt. They had to make it to that cave. "I'll follow you," Eric said, already starting to climb. The journey up the cliffside was exhausting, each step taking more energy than the last. The jungle below seemed to close in around them, and the distant sound of their pursuers echoed like a drumbeat in his chest. When they finally reached the top, both of them were gasping for air, but there was no time to rest. Inside the cave, Keria immediately set to work, activating another device, this one small and portable. It hummed to life, projecting a holographic map of the region. "We need to leave this place before the hunters find us again," Keria said, her voice tense. "I've located a transport ship nearby. We can use it to escape, but we'll have to go through hostile territory." Eric's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "If we go there, we'll be walking straight into danger." Keria's eyes softened, and for the first time, Eric saw a flicker of vulnerability in her. "I don't have a choice, Eric. I know you don't trust me right now, and maybe you shouldn't, but this is the only way. If we don't leave, the hunters will corner us, and they'll take me. If that happens, everything is lost." Eric looked at her, his thoughts clouded by the weight of the situation. He had come to care for Keria, but now he was questioning everything. Could he trust her? Was this really about saving her people, or was there something more sinister at play? Was he being used? Keria seemed to sense his hesitation. She stepped forward, her voice low but filled with urgency. "Eric, I'm asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to help me save not just my species, but your own. I can't do this without you." Eric swallowed hard, his mind torn between doubt and the undeniable pull of responsibility. He wasn't sure what was real anymore, what was right. But as he looked into Keria's eyes, he saw more than just desperation. He saw a woman who, against all odds, was fighting for survival, for her people, and maybe even for something bigger than either of them could understand. The choice was clear. He had already crossed a line. Now it was time to follow through. "Let's go," Eric said, his voice firm. "I'm with you." Keria's face softened with gratitude, but the shadow of what lay ahead still hung heavy in the air. They weren't just on the run anymore. They were running toward a future that could either heal the galaxy or destroy it. Eric's stomach dropped. He knew what that meant. The hunters were closing in, and they weren't going to stop until they had her, until they had both of them. Keria moved quickly to a hidden panel in the wall and activated a new set of shields. "We have to go, Eric. Now." Before he could respond, the entire facility shook with a violent jolt. The lights flickered, and a low rumble echoed from above. They were under attack. The hunters had found them faster than Keria had expected. "Get to the transport room," Keria shouted, her voice now filled with a sense of urgency. "We don't have much time." Eric ran alongside her, his mind racing. He had never imagined that his quiet life as a geneticist would lead him to this, running from alien forces, hunted because of a child that didn't even exist yet. But as they reached the transport room, he realized that there was no going back. He had already crossed a line he could never uncross. The transport room was a small chamber with a sleek metallic floor and walls lined with controls. Keria hurried to a terminal, her fingers flying across the keys. The sound of footsteps grew louder outside, and Eric could hear voices shouting in the distance. "They're coming," Keria said, glancing at Eric. "I've activated the teleportation grid. It will take us to a new location, but we'll be out of their reach for only a short time. Once we arrive, we'll have to move quickly again." Eric nodded, his mind in overdrive. "Where are we going?" "To a place where we can regroup. But we need to get there before they can trace our signal. If they do, we'll be caught." Just as the doors to the transport room exploded open, Keria pressed a button on the console. A bright light enveloped them, and Eric felt that familiar pulling sensation as the world around him seemed to stretch and twist. The light faded, and when it did, they found themselves in a dense alien jungle. The air was thick with moisture, and the sounds of strange creatures echoed from all directions. Eric stumbled as he regained his footing, trying to make sense of the new environment. "We're on another planet," Keria said, her voice steady but urgent. "But it won't be long before they track us here. We need to keep moving. Eric glanced around, feeling the weight of their situation settle on him. They were on the run, hunted by a powerful force, and the fate of two species rested on their shoulders. And yet, despite the danger, something inside him stirred. He had made a choice. He had chosen to help Caria, to help her bring a new life into the world. And that choice had set him on a path from which there would be no turning back. "Where do we go now?" Eric asked, turning to her. Caria's glowing eyes met his with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "We go where the council cannot reach us. We go to a place where we can give this child a future. Betrayal or sacrifice." The dense alien jungle around them seemed alive, as if the very plants were watching their every move. The air was thick with moisture, making it hard to breathe, but they couldn't afford to stop. Not now. Not with the hunters on their tail. They had just teleported to this unknown planet, and Caria wasted no time in urging Eric to move forward. "We need to get to higher ground," she said, her voice tense, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "It's the only way we can communicate without interference." Eric, his legs aching from the run, nodded but couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. There was something about Caria's urgency that felt different now. Yes, they were on the run, but he had seen her before, calm and confident, even in the face of danger. Now she seemed almost haunted. "Caria," he said, catching up with her, "you said this child would bring unity, but you also said the council fears it. They fear what it could become. What aren't you telling me?" Caria stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing as she looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Eric continued, "you've been holding something back. Every time I push for the truth, you give me a piece, but never the whole picture. Why are the hunters so afraid of this child? What's its true purpose?" For a moment, Caria didn't respond. She stood there, her glowing eyes distant, as though caught in a storm of her own thoughts. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but filled with a raw emotion Eric had never heard before. "The child will be a weapon," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Not in the way the council thinks, but in a way no one expects." Eric's heart skipped a beat. "A weapon? You said this child could unite your people, save them. Now you're saying it's a weapon. The hybrid's fate." The transport ship sat in a secluded clearing, its dark hull blending into the alien landscape. The jungle around them had quieted after the frantic chase, but Caria's expression remained tense. They had made it to the ship, and for the first time in days, they were free from immediate danger. But the question of whether their escape would be enough weighed heavily on Eric. They stood in the shadow of the ship, the cool air swirling around them, as Caria worked swiftly to prepare the vessel for launch. Eric watched her, his thoughts swirling just as quickly. The journey they had taken, from a simple life in his lab to a full-fledged race against time to protect an unborn child, seemed like a lifetime ago. Yet the future was no clearer. "What's the plan?" Eric asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. Caria paused, glancing over her shoulder at him. "We need to take this ship to a hidden facility, deep in Erythian territory. There's a lab there, abandoned for years. I've been there once before. It's the only place where we can perform the procedure safely." Eric nodded, though his gut twisted at the word safely. Nothing about this journey had been safe, and the idea of entering the heart of enemy territory filled him with dread. But there was no other option. They couldn't stop now. Not when the child, the hybrid child, was so close to being born. The ship's engines hummed to life, and the hatch closed behind them with a soft hiss. The sudden isolation of the small cockpit felt suffocating as Caria navigated the controls. The faint glow of alien lights flickered around them, casting long shadows on the walls. She was calm, focused, but Eric could sense the weight of her thoughts, the burden she carried. He leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Caria, you've never really told me the full story. About why this child is so important. About what it really means." Carria's fingers hovered over the controls, but she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she let the silence stretch, perhaps to find the right words or perhaps because she wasn't sure herself. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but resolute. "I told you that my people need this child, Eric. I told you it would give us a future. But there's more to it. The Council is afraid, yes, but they're not afraid of the child's power alone. They're afraid because they know the truth." Eric's heart raced. The truth. Carria met his eyes, her gaze intense. The truth about what really happened to our species. The Council has kept it hidden for centuries, buried in the depths of their archives. The Erythians didn't just evolve to become what we are. We were engineered, created. Eric blinked, his mind trying to catch up with her words. Engineered. Created by who? She looked away, staring out into the vastness of space, as if trying to find the right words in the stars themselves. By an ancient race, older than the Council, older than the Erythians themselves. A race of beings who mastered genetic manipulation on a scale beyond comprehension. They created us to be the perfect species. But somewhere along the way, something went wrong. Eric's mind spun with the implications. So you're telling me that your entire species was genetically engineered by another race, and that's why the Council is afraid of this child, because it might reveal the truth. Carria nodded. Yes, this child, born from human and Erythian DNA, will carry the genes of both our species and the ancient creators. That's why the Council fears it. It's not just a symbol of hope, it's the key to unlocking the past. If the child's abilities manifest as I believe they will, it will be able to access ancient memories, abilities that we've lost. It will have the power to bring about a new era, one where the truth is no longer hidden, and where the Council can no longer hold our people in the dark. Eric processed her words slowly, his mind trying to piece everything together. This child wasn't just a link between two species. It was a link to the very origins of the Erythians, a history hidden by the rulers of her people, kept secret for centuries. And now, it was his responsibility to help bring this child into the world. The silence between them grew, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Eric couldn't help but feel a sense of dread growing inside him. The more he learned, the more he realized just how high the stakes were. The future of not just two species, but the entire galaxy, rested on the child Carria was carrying. But that power, was it too much? Could it truly be controlled? The Council feared it for a reason. The ship's sensors beeped, pulling Eric from his thoughts. Carria's eyes flickered to the screen, and her body tensed. "We're nearing the facility," she said quickly. "Prepare yourself, Eric. The lab is heavily guarded. We'll need to move fast." Eric nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The journey to this point had been a blur of constant danger, and now they were about to enter the heart of enemy territory. This was the moment of truth. Once they entered the facility, there would be no turning back. The ship descended toward a remote, desolate landscape. A series of angular structures emerged from the desolate ground, decaying but still imposing. The facility was ancient, but it held the key to everything. Everything Eric had learned, everything Carria had risked, all led to this moment. The ship touched down with a soft thud, and the doors opened with a mechanical hiss. The cold, sterile air of the abandoned lab greeted them. There was no turning back now. They had come to retrieve the final piece of the puzzle. As they stepped out onto the cracked floor, the silence of the place was unnerving. The walls were lined with forgotten equipment, machines that had once been used for experiments that Eric couldn't even begin to fathom. Carria moved quickly, scanning the area. "This way," she said, leading him down a narrow corridor. "The main chamber is ahead. We'll perform the procedure there." Eric followed, his thoughts swirling. He didn't know what the procedure would entail, what it would mean for Carria, for the child, or for him. But he knew one thing. Everything had been leading to this moment. As they reached the main chamber, Carria's voice broke the silence. "This is it, Eric. The child will be born here." and with it, everything will change. Eric's heart raced as he looked around the sterile room. The future of two species, the truth of the Erythians, and the fate of a child with unimaginable power all rested in this place. And as he took the final step toward the unknown, he knew one thing for certain. Their world would never be the same. A new hope. The sterile, dimly lit chamber hummed with energy, its walls lined with ancient machines, their surfaces cracked with age, but still functional. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust, a sign that this place had been abandoned for a long time. But now it had a purpose once again. Now it was a place of hope, or of destruction, depending on the child that would soon enter the world. Karia stood near the center of the room, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared for the procedure. Eric could see the tension in her posture, the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on her like a physical force. She was no longer the composed, confident woman he had first met. Now she was vulnerable, exposed, standing on the precipice of something she couldn't control. Eric, on the other hand, felt a mixture of uncertainty and determination. He had come a long way from the quiet life of a geneticist in a lab. He had never imagined that he would be here, at the center of an alien prophecy, helping to bring a child into the world that could alter the course of history. But as he watched Karia prepare, he couldn't help but feel the immense weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice quiet in the stillness of the chamber. Karia turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his with a mixture of fear and hope. "Now we proceed. The child, it will be born here, with the help of the technology in this room. It's the only way to ensure that its abilities are harnessed properly. We need to guide the child's power from the very beginning." Eric nodded, though part of him wondered if they were truly ready for what was about to happen. The child, born from human and Erythian DNA, would be unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Its abilities, telepathy, psychic manipulation, energy control, could change the very fabric of existence. And yet, even as Karia spoke of guiding its power, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a dangerous line. He looked around the room, at the ancient equipment, the mysterious machines that seemed almost too advanced for this world. "How do we know it will work?" he asked. "What if something goes wrong?" Karia's expression softened, a small bittersweet smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "We don't know, but we can't afford to wait any longer. My people are dying, Eric. They've been dying for centuries. This child is their last hope. It's my hope." Eric took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He wasn't just a scientist anymore. He was part of something much bigger than himself, and he knew, in that moment, that there was no turning back. The procedure began. Karia lay on a metal table, her body tense but still, as the machines around her activated with a low hum. Eric stood beside her, his hands hovering over the controls, unsure of what he was supposed to do. Karia had explained the basics to him, but the intricacies of alien technology were far beyond anything he had encountered before. Still, he knew enough to help. He had to. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady but with an edge of uncertainty. Karia nodded, her eyes meeting his one last time. "I have to be." With that, Eric activated the first sequence. The room around them flickered to life, strange lights illuminating the walls as the machines hummed louder. Karia's body began to glow faintly, her skin shimmering as energy surged through her. The process was slow at first, almost imperceptible, but then, as the procedure intensified, the room filled with a strange, pulsating light. Eric's breath caught in his throat as he watched Karia's body react to the energy. He could see the power beginning to manifest within her. It was unlike anything he had ever witnessed, beyond human understanding. And yet, he had no choice but to trust that this was the only way. As the minutes stretched into hours, Eric kept a careful eye on the readings, adjusting the equipment as needed. The child, still in Karia's womb, began to respond to the energy. Eric could feel it, the pull of the child's power growing stronger with each passing moment. He wasn't sure how much longer they could keep this up, but he couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close. Then suddenly, Carrie gasped, her body arching as a surge of energy erupted from her. The machines around them went wild, lights flashing, alarms blaring as the power reached a peak. Eric's heart raced as he scrambled to keep the procedure under control. This was it, the moment of truth. "Carrie," he shouted, his voice desperate. "Hold on. You have to hold on." Carrie's eyes were wide, her face contorted in pain, but she nodded. "I can't stop now," she whispered. "We've come too far." The child inside her reacted violently, as if sensing the danger. The burst of light filled the room, blinding Eric. He stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. The power was overwhelming, like a storm of energy that had no direction, no form. It was chaos. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. The room went silent, the machine sputtering and shutting down as the energy stabilized. Eric opened his eyes, still reeling from the intensity of the moment. He rushed to Carrie's side, his heart pounding in his chest. She was breathing heavily, sweat covering her forehead. But she was alive. And so was the child. For a moment, they both simply stared at each other, the weight of what they had just done hanging heavy in the air. They had succeeded. The child had been born, its power unleashed. But what would it mean for the future? Eric looked at her, his voice trembling. Is it over?" Carrie smiled weakly, her hand reaching out to touch his. "No, Eric. It's just beginning." As they looked down at the small glowing form of the child, the future seemed both uncertain and filled with infinite possibilities. This child, born from two species, from two worlds, held the potential to change everything. It was both a new beginning and a dangerous gamble. Eric felt a strange sense of peace settle over him, even amidst the chaos. The child's future was uncertain, yes, but it was theirs. And that was enough. Carrie turned to him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and fear. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Eric nodded, his gaze fixed on the child. "We did it," he whispered. "But now we have to protect it." The weight of their actions had not yet fully sunk in. The council would come for them. The galaxy would never be the same. But in this moment, all that mattered was the child, their hope for a future that was still unwritten. And so, the story of their world began anew, with a child that held the power to save or destroy everything. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope.